Oops. Hi there, happy Friday. So today I'm going to talk with you about how the relationship between the design and the budget or the cost that you're allocating to the project. So yesterday I had an interesting meeting with a community group where we are in the process of setting up a community centre, and it's an existing building, and I was asked several times and quite insistently by some people that I should, as the architect, I should just tell them how much it's going to cost to create this project. And the thing is that we are in really early days stages. We haven't even got a constitution in place. We don't have a bank account. This project is at very first stages, and we don't even know what we want to do yet. And we certainly have got no money to do anything yet. So it was an interesting experience, because so many people were sort of saying, you must be able to tell us how much it's going to cost. And I think this is something that it's a common thing that people think, you know, you're an architect, you could tell us how much this is going to cost. And my response was, well, I'm not a quantity surveyor. So as an architect, my role is to design. So I take the information that I'm given in terms of what it is that you want to achieve, and then I translate what it is you want to achieve into space, the space that you need to do that. So for example, if you're looking at home design, I've had clients come to me and say, well, we have regular family dinners, and there's about 15 of us, and we need to seat 15 people all at once for these like once a month family dinner, and we just don't have the dining room that's big enough to do that. So, okay, so that's the need, is a space to seat 15 people for a dinner, and I can translate that to make that a dining room that's going to seat that many people. So that's where I translate the need into the space. And I can also take on board a budget as a guidance. So say, okay, well, we've got £10,000, we've got £20,000, we've got £150,000, whatever the budget is. So this is how much we've got to spend on our project, and this is what it is that we want to achieve. And then I would design to meet both the set of requirements, the needs, the wants, as well as the budget. But I need to have one or other, or preferably both. But if I don't have both, then just a budget alone isn't good enough. I need to have the set of needs. That's the most important thing for me as a designer. And then I will get somebody else to put a price against that design. And then that can be done several times throughout project. And then I can tweak the design, make it cheaper. I understand what's relatively more expensive than, so say, you know, making structural alterations is relatively more expensive than redecorating and changing some furniture. So as an example, there's lots of design options. And so if I have no idea, for example, in this project where we're looking at community centre, we are still going through the process, very early stages of doing consultations, trying to understand what people in the community need and want from a community centre that would be there to serve them. And so because we don't really know what we want to achieve yet, you know, I could start to go, you know, I can redesign so many things. I could, you know, we could put a swimming pool in the basement. We could add a climbing wall to the side of the building. There's so many things that we could do. You know, the world is your oyster in terms of what your options are. But then but at the moment, we've got neither any clear idea about what it is that we want to achieve, nor a clear idea of any budget. And so it's a pointless task to say this is how much a project's going to cost, because we don't know what the project is. Plus, we need to have some idea of where the money's coming from. So if you're looking at home design, maybe your mortgage is coming up for renewal and you're able to release some equity to be able to spend on improving your home, or maybe you've inherited some money or some other things. So then you'll have an idea of how much money you've got. In terms of a community project, you know, there are pockets of funding that we could apply for, and then it'd be worth, you know, understanding, well, what's available in terms of the funding opportunities, what are their requirements, and then design to meet that. For example, on this project, my suggestion, I've got some suggestions for some alterations that we can make to this building, and actually we're going to be able to do them completely for free. We're looking at demolishing a partition wall and moving that along with the door, and rebuilding a partition wall in another location, reusing the door, possibly all the timber from the partition wall, possibly, if we can, even reclaiming some of the plasterboard. And so in effect, apart from the labour, and we've got several people who are willing to volunteer their help with things like that, with building projects, so we can do that completely for free. And that's where, you know, as an architect, I have the vision for what we can do, and it doesn't have to cost anything. For example, I've been to clients' houses and they're struggling with something in their home. There was one client a while ago who wanted to have much easier storage for coats and shoes, and they had a really big downstairs loo, and it had plenty of space for storing coats and shoes, but they didn't like to use it because as you open the door you saw the toilet immediately, and she just didn't like it. And so my suggestion was very simply rehang the door, so when you open it, you can't see the toilet. When you open the door, you'd have to walk around the door to get to the toilet, but when you open the door, you've got direct access there then to hang your coats up. And that was, you know, for her, that was a massive game changer, and it literally didn't need to cost anything at all. You know, they could literally rehang that door themselves. It may then require a bit of a change to electrics, but again, that's a very simple, relatively small piece of work, and gains them much more usable cloakroom space. So as an architect, I don't just wash my hands of costs, which was one comment. Oh, you know, oh, I see, architects, you don't care about the cost. That's nothing to do with you. You just put, no, not at all. Architects are concerned about costs, but just you need to have all of the pieces of the picture to be able to do the design. And if there's no money at all, that doesn't mean that you can't create a design solution and make some alterations that are very low cost, or potentially you could achieve for free, reusing materials that you already have and using your own labor and skills if you've got that, or finding someone else who can come and help you out with it. So it doesn't have to cost you tons of money to make changes. But the very, very most important thing, really, this is the crux of it, you need to know what it is that you want to do. That's the key thing. And if you don't know what it is you want to do, and you just want your architect to come along and pluck something out of thin air, or, you know, I can come along to somebody's home and I could redesign it as I would like to live in it. But the thing is, it's not my home. I'm not going to live there. You know, my client is going to live there, not me. So there's no point me designing a house for myself that I'm not living in and somebody else is living in, because I have particular ways that I live my life that are not necessarily going to be the same as the way that you live your life. And so I need to understand what it is that my clients want to achieve before I can create that space for them. And if they've got an idea of it, how much money they're going to spend on it, I can use that to figure out lower cost options in order to get to the point where they've got the space that they need to deliver that within the budget. But if I don't have that information, I'm not able to create a design. Just, you know, I can imagine so many things. I can create design, but are not going to be a design that you want or that you need or that's going to fulfill you know, your requirements. And so that is the most important thing. Decide what you want, decide your priorities, and have some idea of what your budget is. And then once you've got a design in place, then based on what it is you need and want, then that design can then have somebody else. It wouldn't be me. So quite honestly, putting costs against a design, in my opinion, is a really boring job. And there are people who specialize in that. They're called quantity surveyors, or cost estimators. And cost estimators and quantity surveyors, that's what they do. They assess the design and figure out how much it's going to cost. The thing is, there are limitations with that always, because they can put cost against it, and you can then design to that. And if it's coming out higher than the budget, then, you know, it's perfectly possible to trim it back, find alternative ways to achieve what you're setting out to achieve, but without blowing the budget at lower cost. But then at the end of the day, the project costs what it costs once it's built, because although you can get a cost from a quantity survey and they can be very good, once you go to tender, you may find that all the builders local to you are just so busy that they're just throwing silly prices at tenders because they don't need the work and they're busy enough already, and they just want to maximize their profits. And if you're prepared to pay a higher price, then they're prepared to do the work for you. But if you're not prepared to pay a higher price, then they've got plenty of other work, so they're not bothered. Alternatively, you might find that actually people are really struggling for work, and so they're prepared to put in much more competitive prices than what you'd estimated, and maybe you could have afforded a bit more. That's unusual for that to happen, but it can happen. So, you know, the cost estimator, it is an estimation. It's based on best practice. It's based on best closest understanding of industry knowledge. But it's not going to necessarily be exactly what you end up paying. So there are steps that you can go through to control the costs, to manage costs throughout the project. There are lots of stages you could do that exercise. But ultimately, then, you know, it's a case of potentially needing to be a bit agile. So if you get to site and, you know, something happens, usually the biggest cost increase is in the ground, because you don't really know what's going on underneath the ground, and it's quite possible to find stuff that you weren't expecting, and find that that's where you're ending up having to throw a lot of money into dealing with unexpected stuff that you found underground. And that's important, because that's what your building is based on. So you've got to get that bit right. And then in that case, then you may have to be a bit more agile in the way that you approach the construction throughout. Perhaps, you know, you might have to trim a few things out or go for a slightly cheaper option. But that's something that, you know, as you're going through the construction build, those things can be tackled as well. But it's always worth having something in your back pocket to cover you for potential contingencies where something unknown happens and you have to pay a bit more. So yeah, I hope that helps and gives us some better understanding of what the relationship is between the designing and the costing, because there are different things. They're done by different people. There are different professionals. You know, I, as an architect, that's my role, is to design. And a quantity surveyor or a cost estimator, that's their role, is to put prices against the design. Now, there is talk that in the future at some point, in fact, actually probably currently, the software is available that whereas as an architect, as you're designing your work and you're creating a 3D model on, you know, that you're building it. I mean, I work in 2 dimensions, but for bigger practices, I've worked in 3 dimensions, and a lot of those more sophisticated pieces of computer software, design software, that you could very easily put prices against those and have that software sort of pretty much automatically put together a price that then you can, as an architect, you can see how much it's coming out of, and then you could go almost directly back in and tweak things until the prices that you're designing are closer to the budget, more on the mark. That although that software is probably possible, the software exists that would have the capability to do that, I think. I don't know of any architects who are actually doing that, and certainly no architects of a smaller scale who work on domestic projects. Perhaps some of the much bigger companies may be in a position to be able to do that. But actually, you know, there are people who specialize in doing that, and they're called quantity surveyors and cost estimators. And if what you want is some idea of how much your project's going to cost you, then those are the best people to go to get that information from. As an architect, all I can do is very rough, finger in the air, gut feeling idea of how much it might cost, and give you some sort of a relative guide. So this sort of thing is going to cost you more than this. So, you know, you can choose the cheaper option or the more expensive option. Exactly how much each of those is going to cost, I couldn't tell you, but this is more than that. So yeah, architects have some idea of costs. Some architects are more interested in that and have more of an idea than others. But all architects are capable of working with budgets and understand, you know, value engineering and all of that. This sort of jargon stuff, if you want me to explain what that means, by all means comment below and I will. But yeah, cost estimator, quantity surveyor, those are the people who give you costs. Builders might give you some costs as well, and often they'll use a cost estimator or a quantity surveyor to put tenders together for them. But an architect is not going to give you a cost. An architect is going to give you a design, and the design will be based on what you want to achieve, with your cost or your budget as a guide to sort of lead that design. I hope that clarifies a few things, bursts some myths, some sort of popular opinions about what it is an architect does and how we manage costs. I hope it does, and I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Goodbye for now.